experience last year doing this clinic for the marathon. And I was really happy that they included this type of talk for the half marathon. Because people have a very different experience with the half than they do with the full marathon. So I look forward to helping you with any questions you have on the mental side and emotional side of what you're experiencing or what you want to experience. I'm a sports psychology counselor. I have a private practice, a clinic in Richmond called the Talented Minds Clinic, and we do two basic things. One is the sports and performance psychology, so I work with athletes and performing artists. The other side is cognitive rehabilitation for people who have brain injuries, learning disabilities. So in both of those areas, they seem very different, but really they're similar. People are trying to improve their lives in some way. Some have a real struggle. They're coming back from something. Other people are creating challenges for themselves. Like all of you have created this challenge. Like I'm sure none of you are court-ordered, right, to run the half, although that would be kind of clever, wouldn't it? But what I want to talk to you about are things that I notice come up in my discussion with endurance athletes. So I was a two-time All-American. I was on a team that won 2 national championships, and one in high school and then one in college. So I competed really at a very high level, but my experience wasn't always good. My experience, I had a lot of difficult seasons, a lot of underperforming, a lot of self-doubt, a lot of wondering, why on earth am I still doing this? So it's not the things that were good that actually influenced me today, it's those struggles that have the most profound influence. And I'll explain a little bit why the struggles are often the most important thing. Because as endurance athletes, what a lot of endurance athletes do is they have a they want to have a hands-off experience with suffering and pain. Right? They like suffering and pain is here. You're suffering and pain. I don't want to get too close to you, right? Because it hurts and it's uncomfortable and I doubt myself. And the athletes that tend to do really well in endurance, I don't know where this comes from. I think they're born with this, quite frankly, but you can learn how to do this. They seem to have this relationship with suffering where they view it as a challenge to work through. And it just comes natural. I don't have to teach them anything about that. They're on to doing other things, right? But I work with a lot of endurance athletes at either the professional level all the way down to someone who has gotten pretty good at a marathon, right? And they really want to go after an aggressive time. They're not professional, but they want to qualify for some bigger marathons. So the first thing I asked them is, and the thing that you would all need to reflect on, because you knew, like at one point in your mind, and you probably remember maybe where you were when you said, I'm going to do a half marathon, right? Whether it be for the first time or again, right? And probably the person with you asked why. Why do you want to do that? Like why, aren't there better things? Aren't there other things you could do? Or why do you want to do that again? And the why is a very important question. Because that's the question that for a lot of athletes, regardless of whatever level you are, right? That's the discussion. The why discussion with yourself is what goes on throughout training, throughout the race. And so let me ask you why, okay? So does anyone want to share why they are choosing to train? By the way, thank goodness you made great decisions training in a professional way, right? With coaches who know what they're doing. because it makes it just a better experience, less injury, you know, it's just such a great idea. But why? Does anyone want to share just why they're doing this? Like, what was the initial thought you had?
I'm chuckling to myself because I feel like I've gone through so much of the wild training, like, why am I doing this? That I honestly don't remember why.
Oh, you don't remember the beginning? Okay. Well, that's probably good.
Yeah, maybe.
Yeah. Yeah, I wish I could forget a lot. I wish really we could selectively remember, you know? But, so you don't remember the why, you're just into it now.
I committed to it after doing a 10K, which I think happens with a lot of people, and then with a good friend, we were like, let's do that. It's the next thing we're going to do together.
So friendship.
Commitment.
So
friendship.
bonding, friendship.
Yeah.
Okay. Who else? Yeah.
My 30-year-old daughter is signing me up.
Your what daughter?
30-year-old daughter.
30-year-old daughter? Okay. You do not, you must get this a lot, you do not look like you have a 30-year-old daughter, but she signed you up, okay. And why did she sign you up? Like, why did you agree to be signed up?
Well, I was honored she asked me to do it. You know, she lives in a different state. There's something we're talking about in our conversations. Did you get to run today? She's a new mom, so I really wanted her to encourage her to get out too. But I've been asking myself in this heat the same question. Why did I do this? I mean, because there is suffering and it is a challenge, you know, right? I'm committed to do it now, but that's the answer to the question.
All right, so you did it somehow, your daughter recommended you do it, and you kind of took up the challenge of it,
Yeah.
right? And then now what you're saying is you're in the process of figuring out how this is really for you.
Yeah, how I'm gonna, you know, break it time that
Okay, all right, good, good. And who else? Yeah.
I just want to prove to myself that I can do it.
Oh, the proving, that's great. Okay. The proving, that's very good. Do you need, sometimes certain people choose the proving because it's important at a timing in their life. You know, it's like I need it now. Did you experience the same thing?
That was probably mine. I was going through a difficult time a couple of years ago, and I wanted to keep my mind off of that and work towards a goal. So it improved what I could do. So,
All right, all right. The proving I can do it. What about you? You had your hand up?
Mine's kind of twofold. I did it, I've done it 3 times before, but it's been about 4 years since I've done the last one. So it's, okay, you can still do this, but also it's forcing myself to put myself first because otherwise I wouldn't. And you can't weekend warrior.
yeah.
So you force yourself to put yourself first.
Yeah,
Okay.
as far as like exercise.
Yeah. Yeah, it's easy to get into servicing people all through your day, right? And you kind of lose yourself in the process. This, you can't really lose yourself in the same way.
Right.
Who else had their hand up? Yeah.
I wanted something to focus on other than work.
Something other than work, a nice distraction. Yeah. Yeah. Okay, good. Anyone else? Yeah.
Mine is more of a mental health thing because I've had a lot of struggles with that. So like for doing this, it's like a different kind of like mental fortitude for me. And I think it like taps into that, like proving it's really cool what your body can do, but like what can your mind do?
Oh, and have you noticed any positive effect mentally?
I think yeah, because it's focused, like other people said, something to focus on, like you're having stress related and stress relief. But also I think like I can kind of blink my mind out.
Yeah.
And then also, I was interested in coming to this because I've noticed that like positive self-talk when you're struggling really keeps you pushing along. It was corny as that sounds, but it really does.
Yeah, it does. It does. And we'll talk a little bit about that. There's a colleague of mine, she moved from Richmond to San Diego, which is, it's a beautiful, she's really suffering out there. She has a therapy. She does mental health counseling, but she has a program called Walk Your Talk. It's all hiking and walking. That's your therapy session with her. You talk about your issues. She does the therapy while you're walking. When she thought of that, I thought, wow, it's such a simple. I mean, isn't that what people do, like when they wake up in the morning and they walk in the morning, or they run together? And so it's just a great idea, but it was around something very similar to what you just mentioned, because it has such a profound effect on you in so many ways. I have a couple of things I can share with you that consistently come up with endurance athletes, but I want to make sure I address what's on your mind. Okay, so when you came here, what was some of the pressing questions you had? And I'll try to make sure I cover them in this talk. Anyone want to share anything pressing you have? Yeah.
How did, when your mind is going through the suffering part, like at mile 8 or 9, how you have talked to yourself in your, internal struggle? Because mentally I do want to complete the half marathon, but my body is telling me I'm very tired and I'm not going as fast as my friends. You start having self-doubt.
Yes. Okay. I'll talk about that. Yes.
I was wondering your recommendation about having a time in your mind, like a goal time. As far
Okay,
as-
having a goal time. Okay. All right, that is, I have logged so many hours on that issue, and it varies by person. And so I'll talk about that, okay? So time, and then when you get to that point, we all have that point. Like one marathoner I'm working with, it's usually the 16-mile mark. If she runs off pace, she's going for, I think she's trying to get under 3 hours, right? So when she gets off pace, she, at 16, 17, the 16 is like her Achilles heel. So, yeah.
Sort of along with that, I noticed, it's shifting, but that I have like a negative, like my knees kind of tweaking. I'm like, oh, that's I better stop. It's a bad thing. But then it's actually fine.
Yeah.
Like I tend to do that, like negative, like I can't handle this, but I'm like, that just occurred to me the last time, which was 9 miles. I was like, why am I not just saying, I can handle this and I'm gonna be fine? It's just like a different, kind of like you were saying about the positive self-talk. Like, I don't know.
Yes,
Choosing what we tell ourselves.
that's in a very similar, that's like the cousin of what you just talked about. It's the spiral you create in your head.
Yeah.
And see, you have time, because you're going slow. Like it's not like a really fast event, it's not like 100 meters. You have a lot of time to think. Right, so it's like you're going into some big operatic passion play in your head, right? And who else? Anything else? Yeah.
Well, as we go through the training, the disappointing runs. One day you'll feel good, and then you're thinking, okay, I can do this. And then the next run is going, oh my gosh, you're a lot slower, it's harder, and so you think that I'm not progressing. I think, how come I'm not still feeling better?
I know.
Why do we have these setbacks? And to me, that's just a mind game. I just gotta understand.
I know.
Yes, that
I
that'll
know.
happen. But
Yes.
overall, I think I am getting stronger.
Yes. And I can talk about that, because understanding training, the phasing of training, is super important to help you put in perspective why I may feel flat, and then you start thinking, I'm not working in a straight line, right? And then it can really get into your head. So I can talk about that. For the most part, what's really interesting about that, because I was just talking to someone this week about it, runners especially, when going into competition, so I was working with a Division I runner who's going into a large, important race, and he said to me, I didn't have a good training week, so I don't think I'm going to do very well. And that is so normal. Trying to predict the future based on the last event, or last series of events, that is not a good predictor, right? But, and I'll talk more about what you're experiencing, because you have to, dealing with that is embedded in understanding the training cycles and being a real student of that. Anything else? Yeah.
For me, I walk a lot of marathons, or
Yeah.
marathons, half marathon. So it's knowing the difference between whether it's really a physical thing or a mental thing, when it's not an actual injury, where you're just like, I'm so tired, whether that's really, I really do need to walk, or if it's really, I'm tired of this. It's just a mind thing.
So, and are you having those thoughts when you start walking? Like,
Right before, I'm like, oh, I think I need to walk. But I think, looking back, I probably could have ran the whole way. But I just felt right in my head.
okay,
Like,
all right.
I'm just gonna, maybe I need to
All right.
walk.
Yes. No, I understand. There is a couple of things with that you may want to play around with, okay? Yeah.
This is sort of related to that. I have like super terror of that feeling that I'm going to get it when I'm not running, and that I'm going to listen, and then I'm going to start walking. I'm so afraid of that feeling. Because every single time I go out to run, even if it's just the 3 miles, that I'm going to be struck with that, I'm going to end up walking.
Oh, you'll be fine.
No, I know walking. There's nothing wrong with
Oh,
walking.
so
but I'm
if you give in, it's like a giving in to the walking?
yeah, to the let's slow down, let's walk this. I'm tired. Yeah. Especially when
Okay.
you get the higher mileage that I've never done before, like fear that I won't be able to.
Okay. All right. Okay, so I'll cover a few things and I'll cover each one of these, okay? First of all, the one thing about doing any sport where you feel any level of competency, right? Like we tend to judge ourselves. And we tend to judge ourselves very harshly, and we tend to compare, which is a terrible thing to do, really. I mean, I understand why people compare, but I rarely see many people benefiting in sports from comparison. Unless they're really at the very top of their sport, they're professional, and they tend to really dislike their opponents sometimes, which actually helps them be intense. So they develop this dislike. And they are comparing and so on. They even get down to comparing contracts. But it's all around just getting an intensity. They tend to be built that way. But what I notice happens for endurance athletes is that you start with the why, okay? And the why can often be very simple. Like the why can be a friend asked me, my daughter asked me, I needed something other than work, right? That was yours, right? Needed a challenge. I wanted to experience something physically and mentally very different. All these things are really wonderful starting points, but most people don't stop there. They tend to make a sport so complicated that it stops being about that thing, okay? What I've noticed, and this is spending a lot of time talking with runners and athletes who are doing something from an endurance perspective where they're really pushing themselves. They usually have a reason to start with. Then they layer on all this self-doubt, right? Oh, I'm tired, and I'm not, I'm not training as well this week. What does this mean for me? What does this mean for the race? They start layering on, am I going to stop because it's longer? All of a sudden, the running is no longer just running. The running is some test of them personally, is some definition of who they are, and it gets so personal, and it's usually never positive. It's usually like a fear of something else. But I read something. I'm reading right now The Pursuit of Endurance, which is Jennifer Farr Davis, who wrote it. She was the first woman to set the fastest known time on the Appalachian Trail, man or woman. She broke the female record, and then she said, I didn't even try that hard as I could, and why am I limiting myself going after the female record when Anderson's record is within my grasp? So she went back and broke his record, okay? But here's something she said, and this is the one thing I notice that I have to basically tell clients over and over again. I don't think that your starting point for the reason you are running is really the starting point. I think it's something else, and I think it's what she was talking about. She said she got to, I think she was in Virginia, okay? She was going from Georgia to Maine. She got to Virginia, and Virginia is like 550 miles of trail, the largest, right? She's exhausted. I mean, everything's beaten down on her. And she said, all of a sudden I realized that I wasn't really out here to be the best. I wasn't out here to be a record breaker. That's where I started. I was really out here to see, to experience my best. I don't know why, but that summed up what I notice happens all the time in my office. When she said that, I thought, that's what people are really bringing into my office. She started with breaking a record, and she realized it's really about finding my best. The best of who I am, the extent of my endurance, the extent, just the best of who I am. That is freeing. If that's the main purpose, we choose to strive for bigger things like this in your life and do it again and again and again. You're really trying to find your limit, your capacity, how much you can endure, how much you can accomplish. And it all ripples into other parts of your life. But so the main point is this. You have to simplify exactly the way you view this race in your head. And you have to watch your layering, okay? So here's what it is, okay? Here's basically what running is when you narrow it down, okay? If I simplify it down to its basic components, it is following a strategy, following a pace, running relaxed, and reminding yourself that you can do it, okay? Everything else you do is layered on. What is so-and-so doing? Oh my gosh, they're so much further ahead of me. Or, no, they're behind me and I feel bad they're behind me. You know, maybe I'll just slow down and run with them for a while. I'm not on pace for that time I wanted this time. Oh, this really hurts. I may be fearful of walking. Oh my gosh, what if I walk? That's like a cop-out, right? I'm not supposed to be walking. This is running, calling racing, running, right? It's not walk racing, right? So we layer on, and then, like, what will people think about me, right? If I don't finish, or if I don't finish in time, or whatever it is, we layer all these things on. Now there's a patient said to me, she's running a race, the last qualifier to qualify for Boston, right? She says to me at the end of the session, do you want the app to track me on the course? And I said, Oh, there's an app for that? I mean, I can actually track, it'll track, you know, the chip and show where she is, her speed, and I know what she's gonna have to run or split times, and I say, why do I want that? This race isn't for me. It's not for your friend who's gonna track you on the app, your husband who's gonna track you on the app, your kids, all your other friends. It's not for any of them who are gonna track you on the app, which I think, by the way, those apps are terrible. Because imagine, you're in that race, okay? And you start running off pace. You no longer just have to live with yourself. It's like the shame of letting everyone down. Oh my gosh, they're all gonna see I'm running off pace. Oh my gosh, what are they gonna think? Oh my God. I hate those apps, okay? Partly because you're the one out there running, not those slugs at home. Just checking the app, like refreshing it, right? You're running, this is for you. It's not for them at all, okay? It's not for your coaches, it's not for anyone. Your coaches are a resource. You're the one in charge, it needs to be about you. The more it becomes about other people, okay? And what really got me is she asked me if I wanted to track the app after I got done telling her it's about her. Okay? I didn't do a good job at that. Right? I want that session back. I know now how to do it differently. So the key thing is always, anything you do, you simplify. It's about strategy, pace, running relaxed, reminding yourself of what you're capable of. Now, to segue kind of into what you were talking about and a few other people, reminding yourself what you're capable of, the one thing that came to mind with what you said is that you get to a point right before you start thinking, should I walk, okay? So, I can't remember what university did a study of when does the brain shut down the body during endurance races. And I think what they did, I don't remember how they did it, track that, but what they found out was that the brain shut down the body with the body having approximately 10% left of effort. And I'm not talking about 10% left of effort before death, right? I'm talking about it before, like, total breakdown, right? Where you just everything, your form's like running way off. You look like a ballet dancer. So what you do is and this has to be done in practice. You practice, you see what it's like continuing running, right? Unless you feel like you're going to get injured. You may just slow down and kind of shuffle, right? Not walk, just shuffle. But do it in practice and see what it's like, because it can become really a mental pattern in runners. So when you're catching yourself in your head, globalizing or criticizing yourself or layering on your experience, like piling on negative things on your experience, or self-doubt on your experience, or frustration, just remember, it all comes down to refocusing on what's my strategy during this training run, what's my pace, running relaxed, and reminding yourself of what you're capable of. Now let me talk about running relaxed, okay? One of the best things you can do, and I spent a fair amount of time with runners having them practice this. What I notice is runners who are really at it for a long time, right? They have lost the capacity to notice when they're physically relaxed or not. And I noticed this from the work I did trying to teach them something like progressive muscle relaxation. They can't tell when a muscle is relaxed because they're trained to really do the opposite, right? To work through pain. And so, but I also noticed that they really just don't know how, they run tense with a lot of tension, a lot more than I would like to see. And I said to myself, what if I teach them what it feels like to run relaxed? I'm not going to take you through the whole process I go through because it starts at a pretty rudimentary level, but let me tell you a basic thing I ask them to do. I don't have them focus on their muscles, relaxing muscles. It's a hard thing to do when you are running and you're really straining, okay? Because that's really when you need to, right? When things are breaking down on you a little bit or you're running into trouble, it would be great to be more relaxed versus more tense. But I started trying to get them to just do basic muscle sensing, right? Just notice tension. It was hard for them to do that. So what I did was, I say to them, relax your shoulder joint, relax the joint. Now, you can't actually relax bone, I imagine. I mean, I'm not in the medical field, right? But I would imagine, but when I tell them, imagine your joint, and I want you to relax the joint, they can relax the joint. If I ask them to relax the levers, like relax their knees, relax their ankles, relax their toes, they can do that. And so what I do is I have them in practice, in training, at intervals, at specific intervals during their training, they are doing a body sensing. They're going from head to toe, relaxing like the neck, back of the neck. I have them relax their tongue, and jaw. But I have them just relax their arms, relax their elbows, their wrists. And the more you start sensing those things and learning how to get those joints relaxed, you stop getting into a cycle. Because when you're frustrated or when you're feeling pain or when you have doubt, your nervous system is going to tense your physical system even more, which then, and it takes a while for the nervous system to relax itself enough to get to a good, even state for you to run very focused and relaxed. So what you do is you don't allow the effect on you want to short circuit the effect on your body by just relaxing the joints. And just try that. When you're running, go and try that, and you should be doing it once every mile. Just scan your body, and it could be, I'm feeling tense in the upper body, I'm going to relax my shoulders, I'm going to relax my hands. Whatever it is, it breaks that cycle of your body tensing, which then just reinforces what your mind and your nervous system is experiencing. Because it's tensing for a reason, okay? It feels under threat or that you can't do something. So I want to mention that to you because that one thing alone, the marathoners I work with who do that really well, and also do biofeedback, that helps a lot too. But when they do that really well, they say they can recover very quickly, okay? Because their body does not tense up on them. And when their body is not tense, then they feel calmer, okay? But what else does that give you? It gives you control, right? See, that's the byproduct. That's the important byproduct of this. When you're at a point in a race or your training run and you just don't feel good and things are just not going right, you can feel out of control. what this does, that one technique is a physical one, it's not a mental one. Because this is the one I know, this is what I noticed. If I can get an athlete to change something physically, it has a quicker effect on them mentally in their sport. Sports psychology is taught the direct opposite, okay? Taught the direct opposite. You think your way into, you know how long that takes? You know, I have clients where talk therapy is not gonna help them. I gotta move them to action. I gotta help them experience life differently. They can't just be coming in and talking and ruminating over the same thing every day, because it takes too long to change. But if I move them to action, if they're physically and mentally in a different place, doing a different thing and experiencing it, then they feel like they have more control, because the talk, basically the talking part, the over-talking part, it reinforces more of a helplessness in a lot of ways, okay? So they can't solely talk their way out of it. You can't solely think your way out of a tough spot in competition, right, or in a race. It's really the acting out, because you feel like you have some control and mastery over it. So I wanted to give you something physically to do, okay? The other thing I want you to remember is this. There's a formula I basically developed, okay? It's simple. I mean, it's just, to me, it's a fraction. I suck at math, so I'm not. And by the way, you know how badly I suck at math? And who's really good at math here? Anyone really good? Like no one, like no accountants? Is that accountants or math? Is that math accountant? You know, like one patient said to me, I was talking about statistics, and this kid does math for fun, right? He's a high school kid. I can't believe he does math for fun. He was telling me, I said statistics, and we were talking about math. He goes, Mr. Cerullo, statistics isn't math. Okay, see, he just tapped the highest level of understanding. Like, I couldn't even argue it, right? I just can't even remember what statistics was, right? Let alone, so I took it, okay, well, yeah, like, you know, I acted like I knew that, right? Yeah, oh yeah, I forgot, misspoke. All right, so here's the simple equation. What happens is that we show up on race day, or before the race, you know, days before, and we try to predict, right? How am I going to show? How am I going to race? Okay? How am I feeling? Well, before I get into this little equation, you have to know that before you race, what do you think the body's doing? What do you think your nervous system is doing? Your nervous system is slowing your system down. Okay? It's not pumping it up, because it knows it's going to have to exert a lot of energy. So runners always talk about this. They say, right before a race, I feel sluggish, and I don't think I'm going to have a good race. And I say to them, well, you should feel, well, that's a normal feeling, right? I hear that all the time, and people don't run bad races. And so what I noticed was, when I look at how people survive in the wilderness without food and water and all that, how long they can survive, your nervous system starts shutting down or slowing down systems to keep you alive. You'll start losing some vision and total vision. It'll start slowing systems down. When they research what the pre-race or pre-exertion of endurance athletes, what you'll often find is that the nervous system is conserving energy. Now, if you give into that and say, oh, well, that means I'm not going to run well, okay, then you're just piling on and making it just a lower feeling, and you will convince yourself of it because you have this physical evidence here, right, that you're basing your analysis on. But just remember, how you feel right before a race, how you feel the week before is not a predictor of how you will run. If you believe it, it's running counter to what people have experienced who train athletes, okay? University of Rochester just published a study that showed that was looking at why people deny reality. Why, in the face of evidence, do we deny reality, and why are we so biased that we seek to reinforce our own bias? So they want to know that, and entire systems are set up for us to hold on to biases, right? And make money off of that. So what they found out was, if you had 20 tries at something, and after the 20th try, they asked you your belief about your capacity or your ability for those 20 tries and that, whatever task it was. People base their opinion on the last, in the study, they based their opinion on the last 5. They didn't see the context. They didn't see the full scope of their effort and their outcomes. They took the most immediate and they ran with it. When I read that study, I thought, wow, that sounds so familiar to how people try to predict based on the week before training. Or, I've never run 13 miles straight before. I've never run 26 miles, ever, right? Straight. How am I going to run it if I don't? The most I've ever run is 18, right? So we end up playing games like that in our heads, and a lot of it comes down to we believe we have to feel a certain way to do well, but that's really not sports. Sports is really about how you adjust. That's really what it is. It's people who can make adjustments who tend to get a lot of satisfaction out of their sport and a lot of good results. So this is what I hear a lot. In the middle of the race, I wasn't feeling well. So I pulled back, like I was off my time, or I was just feeling tired. So I pulled back and I didn't put as much effort in, and it didn't really help me recuperate and get back on pace, and I'm kind of disappointed in that. And I see this more with very top level athletes where they're at like 70% of capacity in a race, and they pulled back because they're not at 100%, they don't put in maximum effort. So when they don't put in maximum effort, their capacity drops down to like 50%. They're never in the race. They get killed in races that they should be winning. And it's because if they didn't feel 100% or perfect in that race, they started pulling back effort. And then they end up regretting it. They always end up regretting it. And regret, I think, is the worst athletes have to work with. So, what I'm saying to you is this. Whatever your level, your percentage of capacity is at any given time, unless you feel you're going to get injured, unless you feel you need to regroup, it's like strategy to regroup, run a little bit slower, to work your way back in, okay, that's strategy, right? That's great. But if you feel like you're just giving up on yourself, keep the 100% effort. 100% effort, regardless of your capacity at that moment, will derive a lot of benefit. Again, but not if you're going to feel like you're going to get injured, or if you feel like you're pushing yourself, or you're dehydrated, right? Those are my caveats, right? I don't want you to hurt yourself. But the very competitive runners are in shape enough, like they know, they've been at it for years and years, where I can say, you got to go 100% intensity, regardless of what capacity you got, okay? Because here's why. Very few people are going to be at 100% capacity. If everyone's going to be at a percentage of it, So what I'm trying to say is, don't give up on yourself if things don't go the way you want them. Just keep on pace as much as you can, okay? It's when we really just lose confidence in ourselves, okay? And I think what happens is then you say, well, I could have done, I could have ran that quicker, or I could have persevered to that, or I gave up on myself too early, okay? So this capacity, you want to make sure that your capacity, your effort is always at as close to 100% every time, regardless of what capacity you have, okay? And you have to do this in practice. The way I did it is now I ran competitively, so I had people I had to beat, right? And since age 12, I was running nationally. So I ran from 12 to 22, and really, 2 years, I wanted to quit 2 years, I wanted to quit at 20, right? But I didn't, I'm glad I didn't, actually. But what I would do is, I would imagine each training I went out, like today, I would have gone out and had a hard training, and I would have imagined Rick Buckstaff, who was one of the preeminent milers back then, college milers. I would imagine that I'm preparing for him. So if I gave in on myself, it was gonna be a habit that I was gonna do in the race. I always viewed it as can't create a training habit that becomes a race habit. Really what I'm saying is, it's usually when people just give up on themselves, when things don't feel right. And if that's the case, then you have to practice during training just putting maximum effort into whatever capacity you have. And I'm not saying hurt yourself, but I'm saying don't back off on yourself. Because usually, in many cases, it's kind of a personal, I can't do this, when actually you can do it, okay? One thing about the training is that you have, you each have coaches, right? Like setting the training. You have to understand this. If you don't understand this, you need to talk to them about how they are cycling through training. If you don't know that, what cycle you're in with the training, what phase you're in, each phase builds on the next one, up until when you're tapering, right? If you don't know these phases, or at least what phase you're in, you need to ask the coach to explain that. Because it's super important. Because then you will know why you're feeling the way you're feeling. Some training cycles are meant to be heavy load, where you're going to struggle and suck wind through it, right? It's setting up the next training cycle, right? So if you don't know it, it is super important to know this, because you're trying to understand why your body is responding the way it is, and that affects you mentally, right? You talked about that. It does affect you mentally, right? Because we want to see a straight line on everything. We just want to feel like we're superhuman as the more this goes along. But that's just not the way it works. It's not the way training works. And it does get in people's heads. The more you become a student of training and you're running, the more it helps you put in perspective how you're doing and why you're feeling the way you're feeling in the training cycle. It is super important you know this. It's super important that every coach explain this. If a coach has not explained this to you, they need to explain it. Here's why they need to explain it. I tell every one of my runners, regardless of what level, not that really, well, let's say more high school and college level, I say to them, I want you to go sit down with the coach and talk about the training cycles and durations throughout the cross-country season. Now, one reason why I want them to do this is so they can mentally understand what they're physically experiencing. So they're not over criticizing themselves or their expectations aren't out of whack. But here's another reason why. I want that coach to be forced to actually indicate they know what the training cycles need to be. There's a lot of coaches, especially in high school, who are winging it day to day. They are going out and they come up with a workout basically while they're walking out to the track, okay? So I always tell them, you want them to explain to you what training cycle they're in. If they have difficulty explaining, run away with your hair on fire, okay? Because you need to know that. It's an important thing. You're experiencing this physically. Now, let me, oh yeah.
When you talk about cycles, are you talking about the ramping up versus stepping back, sort of adding mileage, reducing mileage?
Yes.
mileage,
It's a
cycles,
constant,
okay.
it's a constant development and tweaking of
Up,
load and
up, down.
endurance and then speed and then, so it's constant based on the strategy and pace you're going after and time you're going after. So let's talk about time, because you mentioned time, okay? It's the most interesting conversation because it does affect people mentally. There are the predominant, really good runners, when they come in, they're struggling with time, usually. That's one of the issues they're struggling with. They want to say, I can't wear this watch anymore. They really just want to take that watch off, but they don't want to, really, right? And should I race with the watch? Should I chase a time? It all has to do with the individual, okay? What I recommend people do first time out is don't run with a watch. Don't have a time. You're always going to have a time. I mean, we're always going to have a time in our head. But first time out, I tell people, you have to learn how to run within yourself. You have to learn to understand yourself as a runner. You have to experience that run and notice your body. Notice what your body's telling you. And there's no reason other than, unless it really motivates you, right? And it pushes you forward. The first time out, I usually have my clients run without a watch, and not really go. I want them conscious of pace, but I want them conscious. I want them to learn what it feels like at pace, right? Which is what their training should have been doing. I want them to trust themselves the first time out. You learn so much more about yourself as a runner when you take that watch off the first time. I think it frees people up. You're not sitting there and all of a sudden you're running off pace and you're freaking out because how am I going to make it up later? Then in your head you're doing the math. I got these miles left, how am I going to make it up? My gosh, that takes you away from really listening to your body, noticing what pace is like, okay? And now there's some coaching, there's some coaches and there's some programs that, they base a lot on time. They kind of say, well, we'll get you to the time you need. But first time out, just notice it yourself, okay? But let's say you've done the first race, okay? And you learned a lot about yourself as a runner, what your body felt like. You took good care of your body throughout the race. You weren't focused on in many cases, an artificial measure we have. I mean, why as humans would chase a time? Think about it, especially the first time out. This is about you experiencing what it's like doing something really difficult that not many people do, okay? And learning about your body when you're doing it. Now, after that, you have to decide, do I chase time? Do I go after a time, right, and focus on a time, or do I basically enjoy the process of the run itself, right? Athletes who are chasing a time, after a while, after more and more races, people start trying to beat their time. I get that, right? It is hard to do without a watch. You just kind of have to know where you are, right? But here's what I do with runners. I want them to identify, they usually have, a lot of runners say, okay, I'm chasing this time, and I'm going to use maybe these races as some preliminary races before this bigger one, which I'm going after a time, okay? So then what I'll have them do is I have them start off not wearing a watch, not worrying about time, just worrying about their body and pace, worrying about what they can control, strategy and pace, and relaxation. And then the next race, we add the watch. And then it gets more serious around time, right, as it progresses. But it is very hard. The thing I have to keep in mind, and you all have to keep in mind, is if the time is going to psych you out and create more nerves and self-doubt and self-criticism, don't run with it. Don't run with it. You're not going after a world record here, and especially your first one. If you're trying to beat a time, yeah, then you have to learn how to race against time, right? That's totally fine. There's a way to do that. But first time out, I wouldn't bother. I would just, it takes away from you really learning about your body as a runner. So, and plus I think people get way too fixated on time and sometimes have, just get overcritical of themselves. We're out of time?
Almost.
Okay, let me run through some things. The barrier. When you hit that barrier where you are not feeling good, let's say it's mile 8, that's when, like if you know that's a pattern, right? Some people, I think you said, or someone said they know that there's a pattern when they start feeling poorly. If you know that pattern, then you have to make sure well ahead of time you're keeping your body relaxed, okay? The relaxation, when you hit that point, because people hit it and then they start panicking because they're in it. Because see, you have this notion that you shouldn't be there. It shouldn't be occurring. Yeah, it's a part of racing. Hitting those barriers is a part of racing. Don't fight against them. You have to really accept them, right? You have to accept that today I'm going to hit a barrier somewhere, and I'm going to relax my body. I'm going to maybe slow down my pace a little bit. I'm going to work through this. It's going to come, okay? When we fight against it is when the tension builds up in ourselves. That's why I wanted to explain kind of the body sensing and relaxation. Practice it during practice, because this way when you hit that, you have some way of responding other than, oh my gosh, I'm here. Okay? I don't know if that helps.
That does help.
The negative cycle, I really do think that several people talked about getting into a negative cycle. And also the comparison sometimes with other people. With the negative cycle, in training, what you want to do is you want to practice the relaxation of your body, but you also want to practice this. A constant reminder when your mind goes negative, bring it back to pace. Bring it back to noticing your feet, going one foot in front of the other. Bring it back into something you're doing physically. And basically remind yourself this is all about pace. The only thing you can control is your pace, okay? But in practice, you have to catch yourself going negative and remind yourself of something you're going to focus on that you're doing at that very moment just maintain pace. Okay, 1 foot in front of the other. Okay, loose arms. Something that brings you back to simplify your experience. Because when you have like a negative thought, like, oh my gosh, maybe I'm gonna give in and walk. That is when you don't give in, you don't have a pattern. If something is not a pattern for you, you don't worry about it. It's when it's a pattern. Now my physician told me that about something I went and complained about, like, oh, this is hurting me. And I didn't believe a word of that, because I go crazy when I have the smallest aches or pains. I'm the worst hypochondriac. It's like I'm dying with a little ache and pain. But it is true, though. And that if it's not a pattern for you, don't sweat it. You're not gonna, and if you are, so what? There are some really good people, runners that walk because they just have to. Or take a little extra time at a water break, right? Because they just have to. They don't run. Instead of running and trying to, no, they take a little extra time. So, a big part of it is the self-criticism, the self-doubt, and you look at it, is that criticism and doubt a pattern in my running? And if it's not going to happen. If it happens, you'll make the adjustment. A small adjustment. So what if you walk a little bit, right? No one will tell. Like no one, you know what I'm saying? Okay, I wrote something down I know nothing about. So you asked a question. Did you ask a question? Someone asked a question over here about. I can't read my hand. No, nothing? Okay, did I not answer someone's question? Did I get it all? Okay. All right. Remember, you're in search for your best. That's really, you're not in search for a comparison or anything else. You're in search for your best. This is a rare thing in life we get, we give ourselves, to see the extent of our capacity to do something. We are constrained in almost every part of life to never see that capacity. We are constrained in so many parts of life because we have this whole thing about we have to constrain ourselves to not stand out or to fit in or do whatever. You have this wonderful opportunity to run within yourself and just discover the best you can possibly be on that single day. It has no bigger definition than on that single day, okay? All right, well, it was a pleasure.
Thank you.
So we did record tonight's clinic, and I will be sharing it with Sports Backers, so if you want to